Hello, I'm Robert, fact checker and science blogger, and helping people who are scared of things. And this time, it's the start of a new year, 2021, and actually, it's much more positive about 2021. And I think we're really going to see a lot of things, a lot of change happening. The first thing that's going to, or one thing that's going to happen, is that we're going to see the end of this COVID pandemic, the worst of it at least. So, first of all, with the vaccine, then we're in this rather good situation where, for the first time ever, it's never happened before, the entire world is going to be vaccinated together, almost together. A little bit staggered. The wealthy countries, and especially United Kingdom, was first of all, then Europe, then United States, Canada, and then Latin America. It was roughly that order. And then the World Health Organization has not yet done their emergency use authorization, at least not last time I checked. So there are a lot of countries, like sub-Saharan Africa, and lots of countries that don't do their own authorization, or they're not really very well set up for that, or they just prefer to wait until the World Health Organization has done their very thorough analysis and don't see the point in duplicating it. So we should soon see the first vaccinations in Africa and India. I think they're waiting for the World Health Organization, even though they certainly could do it themselves if they wanted to. At least I believe they are. They certainly haven't started yet. And so we're going to see that quite soon, that we have now vaccinations starting all the way around the world, and then vaccinating all the very elderly people. So there'll be a point, probably a month or two from now, anyone over 90 in the entire world who wants to be vaccinated will be vaccinated, everywhere, even remote village in sub-Saharan Africa. That's never has anything been like that happened before. And then go down to 80 and 70 and so on. Each country would, in the COVAX alliance, can decide how they're going to do it, but they're surely going to vaccinate the older people first, and the ones who are most at risk because of underlying conditions, and then as long as it's the one that the vaccine is approved for, and then also all the frontline health workers throughout the world. They will all be vaccinated sometime in the spring. Again, nothing even remotely like that has ever happened before. Very, very positive thing that we are vaccinating the entire world for a particular disease. There are many diseases like malaria, measles. We get very large numbers die every year who've just not been vaccinated. And various other diseases like that, where it's a preventable disease. We have the vaccine. The vaccine is very effective for measles, and yet so many people around the world have not been vaccinated yet. So COVID-19 will be the first vaccine ever, I think, to have been so quickly rolled out throughout the entire world. Usually it's more like decades than in 1 year. And so that's a very, very positive thing. And then this can be a beacon of hope, as the World Health Organization put it, for other diseases. There are quite a lot of diseases that we could get rid of, in the same way we hope to try to get rid of COVID-19. And by 2030 we could have 6, 7, 8 diseases gone from the world. If we did the same with them. Just gone completely, just like with smallpox. So this is a really very positive start. Now, we don't know that we can eliminate it with a vaccine, because we don't know for sure that vaccines can stop transmission. But I think, if you look at the evidence, it's not that bad. And but we don't actually have that data in. There's preliminary data from AstraZeneca. Well, it's stopping transmission. AstraZeneca isn't the best of the vaccines so far. And the AstraZeneca data was 59% for the weaker dose first, and then, but there's all sorts of ways it can probably be improved above that. That's not quite enough to stop it with just a vaccine. But but I think I'm sure it's going to be improved above that. In many ways you can tweak it, and all the other vaccines. And then that was the transmission from the virus, from the infection to the vaccinated person, but it's very likely it's also greatly reduced from the vaccinated person passing on to anyone else with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So those things combined together, I think it'll be another few months before we know for sure, another few weeks to months, but we'll have if it does stop transmission, then we can stop it with just the vaccine. If it doesn't stop transmission quite so well, we have to do the public health, and the public health will greatly reduce it. Now, if we all did the physical distancing, I've talked about this too much before, so I don't want to be spending too much on this. I did a first try of this, and I was still talking 10 minutes later, 15 minutes in. I don't want to do that. So just to say that that Joe Biden is going to do very direct communicating with the public, explaining the science, nothing hidden, nothing secret, not making secret decisions and saying this is what you've got to do and I'm not going to explain why, which they tend to do in the UK, but just to say this is what to do, this is why, this is how it works, this is the science, you can read it up if you want. And that's what Jacinta Ardern did in New Zealand. And that's how to bring everyone together, and they all understand. You're being totally open, you're explaining all the reasons for why you're doing the things that you're doing. Saying this is what we're doing, this is why. You're consistent, you're straightforward, and you don't keep swapping and changing. Because if you follow the science is very clear. So you don't need to keep swithering around and doing different things. That's politics when they do that. The science is very clear, and then you have executive decisions to make, but make them straightforward and just do them. And follow it through, get the feedback, see if that executive decision worked as well as you were hoping. Based on that, do more. And so that is how Joe Biden's going to be doing it in the United States. And just as New Zealand gave an excellent example, I think Joe Biden is following the same approach, following the science, totally straightforward, not attacking it, not attacking the scientists, and just doing what it says, explaining to the people. Then I think he's going to see it going off a cliff too, like happened with New Zealand, where it was a tenfold reduction in 25 days in the cases per day. Give him the 20th of January for his inauguration day, and then maybe a few days for this to start taking effect, maybe a week or so, another couple of weeks, and then I think by mid of February it'll be going off a cliff in the United States as well. Very similar culture, very similar society, very simple way of doing things. I don't see why not. And then with them as an example, then everyone else as well. Now the new variant is not going to make a difference. It doesn't suddenly have superpowers. The mask still stops it, the physical distance still stops it. It's not actually proven, it's just a hypothesis still, that it actually even is more transmissible. There are alternative ideas. And the WHO, they said that it's quite possible that it's a bit more transmissible, but how much of it, and how much of it is due to other things, is what needs to be decided by the science. But whether or not, it's still only more transmissible if you don't do the physical distancing. So what they're basically saying with new variant is, if you don't do the physical distancing, there may be a slightly higher risk of getting the new variant than of previous variants. If you don't wash your hands, if you don't wear a mask properly. So learn to do all those things, and you are safe from the new variant as you were from any of the previous variants. Not likely to be much difference if you do everything right. So so if it's just going to be, it can still be controlled. I believe the best understanding that I have. I don't see, you get people being so pessimistic about the new variant, but there's no, it's not got superpowers. It's not suddenly turned into something that can do things that are physically impossible. So we can still stop the new variant, and it doesn't spread like flu. It spreads in a slightly different way. It's mainly the large droplets, and it's far as I understand it, with the new variant, it's still the same thing. It's the large droplets that are mainly going to be the thing transmitting it. So, so we can. So that's it. I don't want to say anymore. That's 10 minutes now. I've got to get on to the other good positive things. But I do expect that. So the WHO said in their last press conference, but I've already given a long video about that. That either we will end it or we will tame it, and so both of those. So we either that or we tame it with lots and lots of good reducing the vaccine greatly reduces the risk of dying, and then therapeutics as well. And we'll have to see which of those two it is. Right, 10 minutes or now. Oh well, now we can talk about the other things. So, it's some of the other good positive things for the future. So first of all, we'll have better conservation of the world's oceans. So these 14 countries have already agreed to manage 100% of them marine areas sustainably, so they have no unsustainable fisheries at all, and set aside 30% as protected areas where there's no fishing at all. Now, managing it sustainably doesn't mean you don't catch fish. Indeed, it means you get more fish than if you don't manage it sustainably. It's this very paradoxical thing where if you have all the fishermen competing, then each one is maximising its amount of fish compared with the others, but the total is much less than if they're not competing so much. So that's what they mean by managing it sustainably. Actually, if they don't compete quite so much and they take less, they end up in the long term having more. All of them having more. And then if you set aside 30% as a protected area, then that protected area protects the fish, gives like spawning grounds, for instance, and gives them places where they can reproduce, and we can have big populations that then spread out into the other areas. So that again actually increases the total catch of the wild caught fish by doing these things. So it actually makes total sense. It doesn't make sense to do anything else. And so 14 countries agreed to do it. You see all these areas in green. It's quite a large part of the ocean is actually already under, or will be, being managed sustainably. And then they're trying to, they are hoping that the rest will join in. But they've made this arrangement amongst the nations that they knew would be able to make very quick decisions, and were already on that online, like for instance Australia and New Zealand and Scandinavia and Canada, whereas United States and the EU tends to be very complicated and making arrangements with them, so they weren't invited. They couldn't join even if they wanted to, because this group of 14 countries knew that once you got them involved, it all become very complex and involved, and it would take much longer. But now it's been done, hopefully those will start joining in too. Then we also had the Leaders' Pledge to stop and reverse destruction of biodiversity by 2030. So actually reverse destruction of biodiversity by 2030. And so many leaders, the EU, France, United Kingdom and so on, all making this pledge. And it was a pledge with a lot of teeth to it, because they actually pledged to do things like shift the economic incentives, work on waste, work on preserving nature services and so on, doing actually specific, urgent and sometimes quite difficult actions. And they're going to do these things and put that at the heart of their COVID-19 recovery strategies. And this just makes sense. Again, it's one of the things that the IPBES in 2019, they worked out that this is something that the subsidies to destroy nature are perverse. They make things worse for the countries that subsidize these. If your country is subsidizing a company in your own country to destroy nature services in your own country, that's a very perverse subsidy. It's not benefiting your country. And there are many countries that are doing that, just for historical reasons. Once they discover that these subsidies are not being beneficial. Even so, they keep on doing it because of the vested interests of the people who are being subsidised, who want to keep the subsidies going, naturally enough, because they benefit from them. So these countries they're turning it around, and they're not going to do that anymore. They're going to shift the subsidies in favour of the good actors, and generally there are more good actors than bad actors, but the bad actors are sometimes subsidised. So that was what the IPBES said. It was very badly misreported. It was reported as saying that 1 million species are going to go extinct, when actually they said we're doing lots and lots of conservation work, but at the same time we're subsidising the destruction of nature, and that's why our conservation work isn't working. And they said that it's sociologically and economically, it just makes sense to shift the subsidies in the other direction, so we're not fighting against ourselves. Basically, they're subsidising destruction of nature and also subsidising people who try to conserve nature, and the two are fighting each other. It doesn't make sense. And that's a kind of simplification. That's basically what they're saying. And then also things like lots of waste, and also reducing meat consumption. And if we can reduce it by 20%, not go vegan, but just reduce by 20% by 2050. And if we can reduce the meat consumption, it's not everyone has to do that, but if a lot of people do that, and then a few go vegan or vegetarian or Mediterranean and so on. And the various other very specific, one of them is to let the indigenous communities have much more control, and to talk directly to local communities. They know how to manage their own land. They understand every wrinkle of the hills, and they need to be involved in making these decisions. And then they generally can be keen on preserving biodiversity, especially indigenous people, and often local people too. They're much more keen on preserving the local biodiversity. So these are all very specific recommendations, and these leaders they have bought into this. And this is all building up to a big conference in the end of 2021 where lots of nations are going to come together, and hopefully we're going to have big major pledges to do this. And it's all been worked out political. It was very unusual. They had a huge complement of social scientists, about as many as they had climate scientists and experts in biodiversity. And they had a very large complement of social scientists who worked out that this would work sociologically and politically, psychologically. So so that's really what the UN report was. And it was all the gloomy journalists were saying another UN report that says everywhere that 1 million species are going to go extinct, and that's the opposite. They said we can save 1 million species. We know how to do it. This is how to do it. Very specific things, and they work, and they will be beneficial. They just make sense. That was what that report really said. And I didn't see a single journalist who reported it properly. But that's what it said. But the countries obviously listened, because they are now pledging to do this. So this is one situation where the leaders of the countries actually listened to the scientists and didn't listen to the journalists, which I'm very pleased to see. So, there they are, they made this pledge. Now, we also have much more action on climate change coming up. And this is really fantastic news, I think. At last, so it's been waiting for a long time. What is China going to say? They made, in 2019, I think it was it 2008, 2019, I think it was, China said, along with France and China together, made a joint statement that they were going to make some serious pledge. But then it was forgotten after that. Through the 2019 to 2020, with all the other things going with the trade war, and then with the COVID-19 pandemic. But then, just very recently, just a few weeks ago, China said we are going to aim for zero emissions by 2060. And this is a big increase from their previous pledge which was to reach a peak before 2030, and that's about all they pledged, and a certain mix of renewables. But their previous pledge was a very difficult pledge for them to keep, because they're very rapidly industrializing, and while they were industrializing and going right up towards getting towards America levels of GDP, and lifting many people out of poverty and eradicating malnutrition pretty much through China, and giving universal health coverage throughout China. They've really done quite some extraordinary things, and during all that, they had to do it at the same time of transitioning to renewables in order to keep to their pledge of aiming for a peak before 2030. And to do this, China built the largest renewable industry in the world, by far. And exporting renewables throughout Asia, but actually it's partly because of China that we all are enjoying such low-cost renewables. Because in competition with that, and of course lots of stimulated research, you don't have a huge industry like that without a huge amount of research as well. And so the whole world is benefiting from that. We have also got our renewable industries in the rest of the world too, but we've been having to compete with very low-cost solar panels from China, as well as innovative ideas from there, along with our innovative ideas, and being able to put innovative ideas into practice in China. So they have actually helped the entire world with renewables, and I don't think the price would have gone quite so low already if it weren't for China. So that's something they've given to the world, and they're making this very strong commitment now to go down to zero by 2060, and this makes a lot of sense. And Joe Biden is going to be doing the same in the United States now, and it makes sense for the United States too. The United States and China amongst the two worst hit countries in the entire world by climate change. So it just makes sense for them, and they're also the two highest emitters, I think, and the EU is also quite badly hit, but I think the United States first of all very badly hit amongst all the countries. You know, look at Florida, look at the Dust Bowl, look at the droughts in California and so on. There's lots of ways in which the US is very badly affected. China with its rice paddies and its lots of low coastal cities as well, and deserts that can easily be dried out by the Himalayas, and the water supply from the Himalayas being affected and so on. So the many ways that China is affected, many ways the United States is affected. So it's no surprise, it only makes sense. And it's no wonder that China is well behind it. And really the mystery was why the United States wasn't. And it will be under Biden. So what with Biden and China, then we have and I expect both of them to keep to their statement of intent. In the United States, although Biden may be able to be quite ambitious, depending on whether he has control of the Senate, that he will be behind. For instance, California is not going to be fighting with the federal government on various things it's trying to do, and just pushing, and then the central information will be there to coordinate climate response across all the states. And this has a big effect on lots of things he can do without necessarily having these huge, and then he's got the COVID-19 recovery. So I expect lots of good things to be happening in the United States and China, and that we will soon see that them going all well on the way to going down for their aims of zero emissions by 2050 for US and by 2060 by China. So with that, we are headed for 2.1C already by 2100, and we have many more nations, there's 120 or so, that are considering 1.5C pledges, compatible pledges, by for the big conference in 2021. So that 2.1C is not the limit. It may well be below 2C by the time they finalise their pledges at the end of 2021. And well below C is certainly getting within reach. Then we have another round of pledges in 2025 and in 2030. I'll be very surprised if we aren't headed for well below 2C by 2030, by the time we get to 2030. And 2C is the point at which we risk, it's not certain, but there's a possibility of losing really most of the coral reefs. If we keep well below 2C, we can keep a little bit of even the worst affected corals, most of them. There are some areas like in the Caribbean where they've already been lost and turned into sponge reefs. But we will be able to keep a large part of the corals. And then if just bits of, at least bits of all of them, they gradually grow back. And then if we could keep well below C, then we have more chance. And that's the main ecosystem at risk at 2C. At 3C, there are various other ones that have significant amount of risk, although not the entire ecosystem going. Corals are the only one where nearly all of it would be gone if we went to, say, 3C. But there would be some in the Red Sea that are retained in all circumstances. So we've already, by going down to 2.1C, we've made a huge saving already. We saved ourselves from massive amount of trouble by the end of the century already. And then we see that the renewables are going hugely down in price. Look at this. This is the prediction for 2030, and it is just based on on the technology we already have. Oh, what have I just done? Oh well, we're here, never mind. So this is that in my article about that. I went on a video about that. So you will see this big reduction down like that and like that. This is where is the range for fossil fuels? This takes us well below. So we can expect that by 2030, and this is for solar photovoltaic and for onshore wind, then the thing is that fossil fuels, then they have ongoing costs. So by if you get the pricing undercut by renewables, it's going to be difficult to keep the fossil fuels going by the time we get back there, by the time it gets below them, because they cost, most of the cost is actually in the fuel rather than in the plant. And if it's being undercut, then they're losing money. So it's well possible that that's going to happen, that we're just not going to have fossil fuels anymore by 2030. It's very difficult to build a new one. And then we've got, that's halving by 2030, but it could well be halved as soon as 2022. If you look at this, for instance, I think yellow is for photovoltaic, just goes way down like that. It could halve again by then. And if you do that, then that's like this thing here, but it's going from there to there, not by 2030, but by 2022. And that would be more like fitting what has happened before. And so it's been going down. Up until then we need lots of incentives, financial incentives, but now it's got to the point where you don't need financial incentives. And if it halves again, then it would gradually roll out. So we'll have some people buying at half price then, and then gradually rolling out and out, and much easier to install, very flexible panels, not needing, you could just buy a kind of like you buy carpet, almost as easy as buying carpet, and then spread that out in your garden. That's your solar plant. So and it very easily transported to remote places in the Sahara, like in the Sahara Desert, sub-Saharan Africa. And they could just unroll it, and that's their power plant, and it gives them electricity in daytime. So So that's really very promising. It's only pilot commercial plants at the moment, but it's already reached that level, which is quite advanced. So that's not certain yet. We can't say it's going to happen, but it's got a decent chance. Now we've also got there's the Brexit. People in the United Kingdom who've been worried about Brexit. Then we have this deal now, and the prices, the effect on food prices, very modest. It's not a lot of people worried that their food would be expensive after Brexit, and it's not going to be. It's just because we haven't got significant tariffs from the EU. We've got a good deal in that respect. I've got lots more positive articles there, but yeah, just one more thing. So we had the first commercial test electric flight, and that goes back to 2019. It only lasted 8 minutes, but it was a success. Let's just set that playing and maybe maximize it. I'll switch the sound off. There's nothing there, just the sound of the plane. Okay. There we are. So I'll leave it taking off. There's a little bit of taxiing that happened before they've cut out of this video. So this is an electric battery, and this plane gave just a test flight for 8 minutes, but it's the first test of a commercial flight where this is going to become a commercial flight, the exact same plane. And this with electric batteries, it's going to be able to fly for 30 minutes with 30 minutes spare power. So it really can fly for an hour, but you don't need to do half-hour flights. So it's got some extra spare, which you need for safety. So that was in 2019. They're going to be rolling out more and more. That it's not the only company. There are companies in Scandinavia. There's companies in the United States. I think this is Canada, so sometime in probably by early 2020s, mid 2020s, it's on its way down now, I think soon. In mid 2020s, then short haul flights in the United States will be on planes like this. Obviously not seaplanes, but that's just because this is a place where seaplanes make sense. But and it'll cost much less. Electric planes, the flights cost much less than ones that use fuel, and it's both less power is actually needed, because for some reason it can be more efficient, and then the cost of it is less as well. So probably more people will fly, and they'll almost come like flying taxis. It'll actually cost less, and you'll be able to fly short hops, like half an hour plane flights, and then gradually over the 2020s through the 2030s, you can expect as battery technology improves to get longer and longer flights. And there are such things as air lithium batteries, and if they can, is that the right word? Something like that. Anyway, there's a technology that lets you, I can't remember what the other metal is. There's a metal and there's air. I'm not sure if it was lithium. Anyway, whatever the method, then this has a similar power density to gasoline. And so if that battery does take off, and it's quite a difficult thing to make, then that would let us have long haul flights, just electric. And that is technologically it's possible if we can manage to develop this particular kind of battery, or other ones, the various ideas of ways of greatly increasing the battery density, which will let us have a battery powered jet basically. So seems rather extraordinary, but that's what they say. So that's not impossible in the 2030s. We also have nuclear fusion, but that's really very early days yet. Really can't do that yet. And then, well, anyway, I've got a whole long flight here about. Here we are, this rising challenge of zero emissions, aviation. Those of you who follow my blog will have probably already read it, but if not, you might want to have a look, because there are various ways that we can actually achieve zero emissions in aviation. But it's only a couple of percent of world emissions. So don't feel that because you fly, that you're. I think it's best not to think about that as your carbon footprint, because if you fly, then just you could try to do offsetting emission. That's worth doing if you're really environmentally conscious. I don't think you really need to stop flying if you're environmentally conscious for things you need to do. Personal view, unless you want to really make a point about it. It's far more important, even though it's much less of your own personal carbon footprint, to do things like more efficient appliances in your home, and eating a little bit less meat, and that reduced by 20% by 2050. Aim towards having one meat-free meal a day if you are a meat eater, eat a lot of meat, and to just be careful about food waste, reducing your food waste. Lots of things you can do. I've got a list there somewhere. There are many things you can do to better transport and so on. There's so many things you can do, and just do whatever works best for you. Then if you do that, then even though your plane is probably the thing that is your biggest part of your own personal carbon footprint, if everyone did those other things, that would make much more impact on the world as a whole. So if you think of yourself, not just yourself in isolation, but as part of the whole world, then working on getting a more efficient fridge, even though it's only a tiny part of your personal carbon footprint if you do a lot of flying, is still, in terms of if everyone did that, then that's could be more significant. If everyone is doing more efficient appliances and better use of water, especially if you're in an area where there isn't much water, and more water efficient appliances. Then if everyone does that, then that is a very big effect. So anyway, that's all very positive stuff. And then there's the progress towards nuclear disarmament. I forgot to make that into a title. So there's lots of positive stuff happening there. And we've got Biden, and so I've got a separate video about that as well. I won't go into all the details, but Biden, as I was interested to find out, he has for a long term had a very strong direction to wanting to reduce nuclear disarmament, fast nuclear disarmament. That's what he wants. So it's not necessarily he's going to achieve it, but that's his direction. He's certainly, it doesn't mean he's going to suddenly that the United States won't have any more nukes, but it means that he's going to be really working to reduce the nukes, along with bilaterally with Russia, and then they've got to go tenfold reduction before they start thinking about China. Really, I think it's totally wise. He doesn't need to involve China, and at this stage. And the other very positive thing is not just Biden becoming president and being very, in terms of nuclear disarmament, it's also that the treaty to completely ban all nuclear weapons is going to come into effect for the first time 2 days after his inauguration on January 22nd. No connection, it's just a coincidence. They reached their final number of 50 signatories to make it an actual legal treaty. Just so happened the time they did that was had the necessary time to get to 22nd of January. So by coincidence, at that time they had no idea who was going to be the president. And so I think that was before the election. I'm not entirely sure. And anyway, so but it was just they added one nation after another, and then finally got to number 50, and then that makes it law. And so it's binding on all those 50 people, 50 nations, and then it's also creating a very clear signal to the rest of the world of these people, the countries that don't have nukes, saying we not only don't want nukes ourselves, we feel much safer if you don't have nukes. That's what they're saying. Because it is a treaty to eliminate all nukes in all nations. And they want the other countries to join. Not just for them to join, to eliminate them. The treaty is to total elimination of all nukes. So that's quite a strong signal that they are sending to the rest of the world, saying, we don't feel safe with the nukes, so please get rid of them. So I think we're going to saw a lot of people who worry about nuclear war in our group. Well, we are definitely heading in that direction of fewer and fewer nukes. And I think over Biden's 4 years, together with the impetus that is coming in the rest of the world, I think we're going to see more progress towards fewer nukes. So we'll see what happens about that. I think it's quite promising. Now, so those are the main things we're going to talk about. And then here are the things, look, you've probably seen that before, loads and loads of videos of good things that are happening. So I was just talking about broad brush stuff here. There's loads and loads of nitty-gritty stuff going on. This, for instance, is a project in Iceland to grow trees. So as it gets warmer, it's actually having to grow different kinds of trees in Iceland and begin the slightly warmer conditions. And Iceland they've got hardly any trees there naturally now, but originally it did have lots of trees. And Iceland is an example of deforestation. And where I live in Scotland, in the Highlands of Scotland, Highlands and Highlands, we're an example of deforestation. All those bare hilltops that look so marvellous in Scotland, they're deforested. They should have been covered in trees. They should have oaks, native oaks and birches, and obviously of course the Scots fir, all the way up nearly to the summit. Some of them would have, the very highest ones would have treeless regions at the top, but they would be just covered in trees all the way up. Many people don't realise that. So when you talk about deforesting the Amazon, I mean, of course we should stop deforesting the Amazon, but it has already happened throughout Europe, throughout the United States, and in Iceland. Iceland is reforesting. Indeed, we're seeing reforesting mostly in most of the world. It's only in South America and Sub-Saharan Africa, I think mainly South America, that we still get deforestation, and in the same place we're getting reforestation. For instance, in Brazil, the Amazon coast is reforesting. Got reforestation for the Amazon coast forest. They're not tropical rainforests, they're what they call subtropical or something. They're not subtropical, I can't remember what they're called, but the forests along the Amazon coast and quite a long way inland in Brazil, the foresting is growing back. And then if we go and look at Brazil, so I've got an article there about that, so you want to have a look at that, and all these other things you can read. Yes, this is how actually people go on and on about how so many species are going extinct, but actually out of 63 species of mammals that was the immediate distinction, we saved 48. Now, it's very sad that we lost the other 15. Quick subtraction, 48 from 63, yes, 15. Then so we lost 15, but we saved 48. And remember the Leaders' Pledge, that's going to turn around completely, and we should, by 2030, see if everyone's doing that. And because from IPBES we know it can be done, it's been proven, it's all worked out how to do it, we can actually completely stop the extinction of species by 2030. If enough countries came together, then they can stop it, they can just end this whole process, because we are already subsidising a lot of the conservation of species, and IPBES came to the conclusion that the reason they're going extinct is because we're also subsidising the destruction of nature. We're just subsidising the destruction of nature and biodiversity, and at the same time subsidising the protection of nature and biodiversity, and that's why we haven't been so successful. So We lost 15 because of subsidising destruction of nature, and we saved 48 because we're also subsidising the protection of nature. And if we're more consistent and sensible, then we can just stop it. So by 2030s, we could well be, depending how much uptake there is in this conference at the end of 2021, it's a very important conference. There will be other ones in the future if that doesn't work. But depending on the uptake from that, we could be seeing that by 2030, this whole extinction thing is coming to an end, especially if at the same time we have managed to aiming for zero emissions, aiming for well below 2C. Then we can expect by the middle of the century that we are seeing the end of this extinction, which is nowhere near mass extinction, obviously. It's not going to be a mass extinction anyway. That's a huge exaggeration. Even over several centuries it starts to become a mass extinction. Even then it can never go all the way because, for instance, we have preserved the seeds of nearly all plants, apart from certain tropical plants. That didn't happen in the past. The dinosaurs didn't preserve seeds. We have. So you can't have a mass extinction of plants. We'll be able to plant them back when conditions are suitable. And then we won't have a mass extinction of birds. They're actually among the least vulnerable because they can actually move, because we are living in a world where there are far more habitats than there were at the time of the dinosaurs and certain times in the past. And mostly birds can move to another latitude or move up a mountain or something. So some are much more vulnerable, but most of them. And then if you look at all the species that are at risk, then I don't think there's any group, most groups, something like 3/4 are not at risk. And sometimes it's more than that. They're just of no concern. So you're talking about polar bears somewhat at risk, but they're not going to become extinct. And then other bears, they're actually benefiting from the change of climate. So it's not really very well explained. There are risks of some species, but you're not talking about anything like a mass extinction. You're not talking about a world without bears. You're not talking about a world without whales. Indeed, they are greatly increasing, most of the whales now, very luckily. So anyway, so hopefully this helps you to see it's much more positive than it's usually made out to be. We can grow enough food for everyone. Next year is good. I didn't mention that in there, but the FAO projection for next year is going to be a bumper harvest. It's going to be nearly 1 billion tons of grain surplus, and it'll be the highest ever surplus there's been. So the COVID pandemic had almost no impact on farming, because farmers can keep up with their farming even with physical distancing. Makes no difference except for packing of the plants, of fruit, and that mainly affects tropical fruit like mangoes. So there was a hit on mangoes. With bananas, they were able to supply them, and they got an increased demand. So there's we don't need to worry. We're not headed for mass hunger. We do have the usual famines risks like you have every year, and we're rising to that challenge. And very slightly more this year. Not the world. The world is a great surplus of food, and famines in certain countries for things such as natural disaster and difficulty of local failures of agriculture, not being able to buy the food for economic reasons, or for difficulty just transporting it, and so on, and diseases, things like locusts or whatever. So these sort of things happen every year, and we are rising to them. But the main thing is, through the COVID pandemic, we've actually protected the economy of the world with the $1 trillion IMF fund and the World Bank and the Food and Agricultural Organization, and thousands and thousands of people working behind the scenes, not appearing on television, who have been the people who have managed to keep things going throughout the pandemic and managed to stop several countries from going bankrupt, which would have happened without their help and without their tireless work and making sure the food does get produced and dealing with little problems that could have caused farmers to not be able to buy their seeds or whatever. So they've been, and then dealing with the financial situations with very careful financial incentives. And this is going to happen, and so we're going to get the end of the recession. Oh, and China ended their recession very quickly, and we should be grateful to China again for ending their recession so quickly with such a fast pandemic response, because that makes them a place that can buy things from other countries and sell things to them. For instance, China are one of the main producers of many of the ingredients for medicine, and so they're up and running, and they've been producing that ever since the end of their pandemic. So, you know, all the medicines we enjoy in the rest of the world, it's largely because of precursors that are produced in China. Indeed, many of those precursors are produced in Hubei province, and they were hit at the beginning of the pandemic because of the lockdown and because of all the measures they had to take and people not being able to go to work to make these things. But they're back up and running, and so we actually benefit quite a lot from. China had a positive GDP, the only country with positive GDP in 2020, and so they helped to keep the entire world in a more positive direction, because it's not another place to buy things from and sell to for the rest of the world. And then as it comes to 2021, then we, especially with these very effective vaccines, it's going to make a huge difference. Then we can see the economic recovery that we all need, and the jobs, and then people, and then so many countries are going to be doing the green recovery and using the incentives to move us in the right direction towards preserving nature services. Like I said, like at Leaders Pledge, they made that pledge to make the recession recovery to be preserving nature services and not fighting against, not the two hands fighting each other, but the two hands working together. And that's what we're going to see. And so I get people very worried about this great reset in the, it's a thing in World Economic Forum. It's actually a good thing. It's what I'm talking about just now, how we're actually moving to a new, better way of doing things. Also, things like the Zoom conferencing that we've probably most of us taken part in, then we have learned how to do that. We're going to be doing more of that in the future, and this saves many plane flights. So there's people have learned new ways of doing things, ways of working at home, which they maybe didn't realise they could do before. So we are going to have changes like that. We're not going to build back exactly the same way. There's going to be a lot more renewables in the world. There's going to be a lot more preservation of biodiversity and incentives towards nature, preserving nature services. And so, and we should see, we'll see just a small reduction, but a reduction in CO2 emissions this year, which is not going to go all the way back up again. It's going to stay down lower than it would have been without this year. So there are lots of very positive things happening as we move into 2021. And there we are, yes, I talked about that. And oh yes, and some people worry about chocolate. I think I need to do a separate article about that at some point. But it's true that with climate conditions, that in a warmer climate it's more challenging to grow chocolate, but we are rising to that. And part of the problem really with chocolate trees, with cacao trees, the problem is that there's been a lot of work on new varieties of rice, and that is really rising to the challenge of the climate change. Rice is actually increasing and becoming more productive with warming and extra CO2 in the atmosphere. That's because we do lots and lots and lots of work on new varieties of rice, and it's keeping track and it's actually getting more and more productive. Now, when it comes to chocolate key or cacao trees, then that hasn't had the same level of investment. And papers just this year, last year or this year I think, saying we need to work on improving the species. There's most of the species are in South America. I think it's a native South American tree. It's a wide diversity of genetic material that we can use, but it has not been. We haven't had the green revolution type work on the cacao tree that we have had on, say, rice. So that is happening, just starting to happen, and then they're learning new ways of working with it. So all this is happening in the future. It's already happening. It's going to keep going. Oh, and I was going to talk about Brazil. I'll talk about Brazil at the end. So the last little thing about good things happening in Brazil. I've talked about that before. But yeah, so just talk about the chocolate. It's how chocolate is being saved. That it's no risk of it going extinct, but there was a risk of chocolate production going way down and becoming very expensive. So no, we're headed for a world with chocolate still. And they're finding new ways of growing the crops. They discovered that ways of making the soil damp. The problem with the cacao tree and the chocolate, the cocoa beans, is that if you get a dry patch, it just can't handle that. And even the trees die, or just very bad harvest. And so it has to be kept moist all the time, or much more than other trees. And it's a tropical rainforest type tree. And the problem is that some of the traditional areas have got drier. So the various aspects of it, one is keeping the soil very moist, and then lots of shade, so it grows. Some farmers have tried, they grow the cacao trees without shading from other trees, and they discovered that especially with climate change, it makes a lot of sense to have other trees, and that actually it's more productive. You would think the more sunlight, the more productive it is. It actually needs a bit of sun shading. It's actually a bit more productive with more shading if you choose the right trees or the same productivity. Even with trees, you think the other trees are taken from the ground or something. It doesn't work like that. So so farmers are learning different ways of growing their trees that are more climate resilient, and then they are also doing things like growing honey and other crops, which means that the individual farmer, if he loses the crop one year, he's not going to be in a disaster and lose his farm, and so this is much better for the continuing of the chocolate production, because he's got other things to, or she's got other things to fall back on. So all this is making it much more resilient. And then there's some things, to a certain extent they also have to actually moving the trees, so they're having to grow new trees, for instance at a high elevation or different places because of shifting climate. But we don't mind it. It seems to be well in hand from what I've been looking at. A lot of work to be done, but they are doing the work, and the future will still have chocolate. So all your chocolate devotees out there, we're not headed for a world without chocolate, and that's because a lot of work by lots of people. Same with rice. So all this stuff is going on as well. So yes, I was just going to talk very briefly about Brazil, but many of you may already know about that. Where is it? Yeah, example of Brazil. So yes, so Brazil has they could keep twice as many cattle on the same land if they used the same efficiency as the United States. That means that they could have half the land for cattle, since an awful lot of the land in Brazil is used for cattle ranching. And this involves really pretty simple basic measures. but that the farmers find it difficult to afford to get the capital, even though they would earn back from it, and mainly reseeding the grassland, which you just do automatically in the United States. You wouldn't even think of not reseeding your grassland. But in Brazil, they just go with the grass as it grows, and they don't actually reseed with better crops of grass. And so there are simple basic things in Brazil, and it's gradually coming in, and some of the NGOs are helping to make this happen. And then ways of mixing in the first of all commercial trees, and then having the native trees along the rivers, and this can help preserve the very important corridors for wildlife, and preserve a lot of the rainforest can actually go back pretty quickly because conditions are just right for it. And you don't get a totally mature forest, but you get a pretty good rainforest where you get lots of species still living that can grow back quite quickly. And according to some projections, by the middle of the 2020s, maybe even earlier, then Brazil will shift from gradually encroaching on the rainforest to gradually having more and more abandoned land. Then it'll be starting to think, how do we use the abandoned land? And this has already happened in the the east coast. Yeah, the east coast of Brazil. Sorry, I got that wrong. The east coast, the Atlantic coast of Brazil, and those forests there, then they are already some of the agricultural land is abandoned, and they're regrowing the forests there. Because of a past history, I'd have to look at my article about how that all happened. But so there is forest regenerating along the Atlantic coast of Brazil, and it's not impossible, especially the agriculture is improving anyway, and this natural improvement, getting more and more efficient, is of all the crops. I just chose the example of cattle, then in other things as well, then that can mean not quite possible that in the mid-2020s we can see a shift away from that. And something else I can mention, for those of you who are scared of asteroids, then the Vera Rubin telescope, that's 2021-2022 first light. This will give 4 times deeper and 4 times depth. I'm not sure what the latest is on the first light of the Vera Rubin telescope. Let's bring that up. I could have added that. See if I'll bring up this question thing about do you agree to this? So I'm just going to say yes. But I agree, because I'm on the private window so as to not get notifications. So the Vera Rubin telescope, first light, I'm not sure. I think, so first light, I think is 2020, I'm not sure it's 2021 or 2022, that's why. But anyway, this telescope will be by far the biggest telescope. This is an artist's impression, maybe a better one. It'll be the first, it'll be dedicated for looking for asteroids. It'll be able to see them 4 times further away than any previous telescope of the ones devoted to looking for asteroids. That means 16 times the search depth, search volume. So it'll find probably find more asteroids than all the other ones put together in the first 3 days or something. Like, I'm not sure, I can't remember the figure, but it'll find many asteroids, of the smaller ones, that are hard to spot at a great distance. And it'll find a lot of them in the first few days. It surveys the entire sky. It's in the southern hemisphere, which is slightly less studied. And we've got lots of other asteroid search telescopes coming on as well to help with will produce the first light. No, that's not that. The first light. See if it says first light. And then you've got the first light expected in 2021. There we are. Yes, I thought, I wasn't sure it was 21 or 2022, but probably get the first light, which is an astronomical term for meaning when you first turn on the telescope and actually look through it, take your first photograph. You take its first photograph in 2021, and then they usually have a kind of commissioning run where they go through and they check everything over, have some useful photographs, and then they have the actual starting the operations proper, because they have to calibrate it and they have to do tweaking of all the instruments and things to make sure it's all working properly and test it, and then they'll start the run. I'm not sure if that's the actual start in 2021, might be 2022, but as soon as they do that, immediately it's going to hugely increase the number of asteroids that we can find. That's going to happen in 2021. And so this will help to make the Earth a safer place because we can see these things in advance. So, yeah. And there are quite a lot of other telescopes coming online in 2021. And there's the whole, I'm not sure if it's 2021 for the European ones. There's the European ESA project. Lots not so small. They call it the Fish Eye or something. It's not quite, there's something eye telescope for the with that eye telescope, ESA eye telescope, that might bring up the name. I can't remember what it's called, might bring it up. ESA, no. ESA, Fish Eye, Fly Eye, that's the one. The ESA Fly Eye telescope. Yes, so this one's, it's because it's like it looks like the eye of a bug in the way it's designed. Let's see if it's got an image of it. So I'm not sure when that will be, but it's quite soon. Accept all cookies. It's got it's inspired by an insect, and it's got and it's equivalent to a larger telescope. And so yes, the first Fly Eye will be in Sicily, and then it hopes it gives 3 weeks warning before any impact for anything larger than 40 meters by 2030. At the moment, Atlas can only spot about half of them at that size, a bit over half. So this is going to make a big difference, because there's going to be lots of them all around the world. And so I think their first ones are pretty soon. I'm not sure if it's if it's next year. And anyway, but the Vera Rubin telescope, yes. So that's going to be a big plus for finding asteroids quickly and helping to keep us safe from even the small ones. And sadly we don't have any space telescopes, but we're doing pretty well on ground-based telescopes. So anyway, lots of other things are good to talk about. I don't know, I'll stop now. I thought I'd give you a few cheery things that are happening in 2021, and hopefully this helps a bit. I'll put the link in the video description.